Welcome to episode 7 of Inside the Investor's Mind. In this episode, our host Jack Cohen sits down with Nick Mysore, a seasoned investor with a sharp eye for scalable opportunities and long-term value. Join us as we dive into Nick's unique investment philosophy, what he looks for in founders, and the key factors that influence his decisions. Get ready for a deep and insightful conversation that will sharpen your perspective on what really matters in the world of investing.
Okay, well, welcome to the August 2025 live podcast of Inside the Investor's Mind, where we invite seasoned investors to share their knowledge and experience with entrepreneurs. Each of our sessions are non-scripted and are designed to be conversational in nature. Our guest investors have not been given a list of questions beforehand, and the purpose is to do a deep dive into the questions as the conversation develops. As a reminder, today's discussion is informational and educational, and each entrepreneur should do their own discovery and due diligence when working with investors. And the same goes for investors doing their due diligence with entrepreneurs. Today's guest is Nick Mysore, who's been on before. Nick is a longtime investor with over 15 years experience with investing in consumer products and AI-based projects. Please join me in welcoming Nick Mysore. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Jack. Good to be here, and glad that you have me here.
It's nice. We've had you on before, and welcome back. We greatly appreciate it. Maybe we can begin by you providing us with a little bit more detail about your background and your investing principles, Nick.
Sure. My background, I started my career with a very interesting company called GTE Telecommunications.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and worked on the merger that became Verizon.
Big company.
That led me to go to a company called TXU Energy, which was in the deregulated space. So I worked in two deregulated industries, energy and telecom.
How'd you get into consumer products, Nick?
And that's when I went after TXU. I ended up at consumer products for Conagra Foods.
Oh, there you go. And how did you?
That was a great move, and I did the China strategy for them.
How did you develop your interest in AI? I'm curious to know about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So as I went through, I used to run an insights division for them. Then I went into Dean Foods. I did very similar kind of strategy work. Then if you have seen the milk mustache at Got Milk, you're from California.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
I used to be on the board of that for a while. So over the years, one of the things that I noticed was in the insight space, there was a lot of data, but no insights from the data, okay? It was very difficult to garner the insights. That's how I got into AI. I said, look, we should have the tools in big data and analytics that can help us understand the consumer mind, psyche, and we should be able to get results a lot faster, as opposed to waiting 6 months for the survey results to come back.
Speed and rapidity with data is absolutely essential for successful marketing.
Exactly. So anyway, that's how. And then about 15 years back, I got into this investing game and never looked back.
Yeah, can you kind of give us an example of a success story and a horror story?
Well, we have plenty of those.
Well, pick one that's memorable.
The success story is when you are able to exit and get some money back.
There you
go. The horror story is when you're constantly trying to figure out how to get out.
That's always a challenge.
Yeah, so I've had both. I've had some successes, some horror stories, but I'll tell you the key that I find, which I think is very interesting to the question that you asked me before. What do I look for in these investment vehicles, right? See, it's not just, in a startup, it's not just the money, because the money just gets you a certain direction, right? Maybe a certain way, to one pathway or one gateway. After that, what are you going to do? You're going to request for more money, right? So part of the game here is to think about a three-pronged investor relationship. So I tell people there's a difference between me and a venture capitalist or a private equity guy. We are venture builders. So our goal is to scale the business, right? So if I scale the business, then I make money. Of course, we want profitability in the business, but we also want scalability because that can generate more profits.
That's one of the topics. I want to talk about mistakes that people make today. We had a little discussion the other day, just to go over the format for today. And I never really advised our guests about the questions I'm going to ask. But one of the topics that did come up in our initial conversation was the lack of trust or the lack of using investors for their experience and advisement. And I know that's something that you commented on in our conversation. Maybe you can expand on that as a way for investors to really utilize their systems.
Here's the philosophy I have. I don't think any one entrepreneur can do it on his own. He needs to surround himself with the expertise of the people, and he needs to have good, experienced executives who can help facilitate the growth, right? So that is the one very critical thing. The second thing that we bring to the party is the contacts and the formulation of the strategy. That combined with the money can make a big difference. Right?
Absolutely.
And so you talked to me about a horror story. I can tell you one horror story was where we bit off a huge project, almost $100 million. And it became very hard for us to get out of it. Okay, that taught us a big lesson. It told us, vet the entrepreneur very clearly, make sure that he listens or she listens, right? If the entrepreneur is willing to listen and take guidance, it makes a hell of a lot easier to protect your investment.
It's like you're the trainer, the entrepreneur is the jockey, and the horse is the business. And
yes,
you got to make sure that the jockey is willing to listen to the trainer's advice.
Correct. So if you're like a coach, you're coming in, you're looking at things very differently because you're bringing in that experience. You're bringing in experience across multiple industries. You're bringing in experience and contacts across multiple industries. And last but not least, you're bringing in the syndicate of people who may want to invest in you.
Have you an example of an entrepreneur who came in with maybe their eyes closed, and through your advice, they were able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, let's say?
I'll give you, it's in the CPG space. Okay, they were launching a new product, and in CPG, if you understand in consumer packaged goods, you have to go in front of the retailer. You have to be able to sell online. You have to be able to sell to wholesalers and distributors, right? And if as an entrepreneur, you think your product will sell by itself on Amazon, you have a problem.
Big problem.
You just can't make the brand work. And look, building a brand takes a lot of money, right? And so we had an entrepreneur who thought Amazon was it, and that was the only way to go, which is fine. He could have done everything online, but he didn't have the brand pull that a retailer could give you. So by getting him into two of the retailers for display, more so than velocity, we were able to actually do the combined online, offline strategy that helped him grow his business and exit out.
This dovetails back into your comment about scaling. You can have a great product on Amazon, but that is a limited market. It's only one channel of distribution. When you talk about consumer goods, you talk about being able to have exposure in places like Target or Walmart or various other national retailers across the spectrum. When you have a distribution channel, you have so many more feet on the street, so to speak, representing your product. And as you said, it is quite, it's costly, it's expensive. It's
Oh, it's
marketing.
very expensive. The retail is expensive. It's an expensive game because you're talking about trade dollars, you're talking about placement, you're talking about hiring different sales guys, right? Channels. But the advantage is if you have a presence there, you can leverage your digital marketing efforts to scale up your digital sales, right?
It becomes a launching pad essentially
Correct.
for business.
Exactly.
So you remember Fry's Electronics?
Yeah.
So they're out of business now because of COVID. They decided to pack it in just because of imports and supply chain. But I worked for a company, a Japanese consumer products company years ago, who created some really great products, but did not understand the value of retail marketing and being in some of those boxes. And until they got the message, the company floundered. Now, once the company got the message about being able to be in multiple channels of distribution, the company took off. I mean, to your point, you really need to leverage.
See, you need to be open, right? It's not necessary. It also depends on the product. It also depends on the brand. Right?
Absolutely.
So it also depends on what you use and what you leverage, the digital marketing channels. Like you could use the Facebooks, the Googles, the Instagrams, and create influencers and so on and so forth. But in order to do that, you have to have a presence somewhere. And if somebody doesn't want to be able to get it online, they should be able to get it offline.
Correctly. Absolutely correct. Yes.
And you should be able to take that product and be able to mail it, if that is the case, right?
Exactly. I mean, I love products. I love products that I could either pick up online, or if I need to get them right away, go down to the local store and pick them up. And
Exactly.
it makes the acquisition of product much easier. Along the lines of mistakes that people made is lack of preparation. And I know that if some of our folks watch things like Shark Tank, and somebody shows up on Shark Tank selling lemonade, and they forget to bring the lemons. It's not quite. It doesn't come off quite as a good show. So maybe you can comment on preparation, on what entrepreneurs should do in order to be prepared when they speak to people who are investors.
See, number one, I think have a good, sound business plan. Work with your advisors and your team and your directors on the board of directors, and make sure you put together a good business plan that talks about your unique value proposition, that talks about how you're going to gain your consumer base, right? And how you may be able to scale the business.
This is a big mistake that a lot of new entrepreneurs make. They create a business plan for the purpose of having a checklist business plan, yet they don't really use the business plan as a living, breathing document.
You need to be able to execute your plan.
Yeah.
So if you don't execute, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? And in order to execute, you got to be able to maneuver. So part of the strategic thought process that we teach these guys is, hey, how do you maneuver? Because once you put the money into the business, you got to get it out.
Yeah. It's not just maneuvering as well. It also has to include a way to pivot. When the market changes, when something in the market, something in the environment or ecosystem changes, you need to be able to adapt. Now, for example, I'll give you an example of this. A lot of biotech companies today, they get their start through National Science Foundation grants.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a business plan. They're going to use that money to get their initial research off the grant. And now, with federal cutbacks in NSF grant money, these folks are now scrambling for private equity money. So in their business plan, now they have to rewrite or modify their business plan because now the source of funding has completely dried up on one side, and now they need to go somewhere else.
That's right. And think about it this way.
Yeah.
How you approach the grant is very different to how you approach the private equity guy.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I tell the entrepreneurs is, look, you have to have a business plan that is flexible, and you should be able to pivot with the changes in the market. Remember the old low carb craze that was
Yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody put low carb products out there, and then large companies actually went bust.
It's interesting when you mentioned that, because that's a bandwagon effect. People jump on a particular marketing bandwagon with
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, and we talked about this a little bit. With artificial intelligence, everybody's got an AI component to their product, and there's no differentiation. How important is it to really leverage the AI component, but really enhance it with something that's different in the marketplace?
Well, look at the need of what you're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. If you look at a large company, innovation in the pipeline takes 4 to 5 years to put it into market, right? And you worked in large companies, you know this, right? To put a flip cap on, we took 4 years. Yeah, right. So, but innovation can be driven by normative databases and artificial intelligence taking those normative databases and scouring it and coming up with some interesting corridors to explore a lot faster than you could do historically. So, right there is your product, right? If you can take the time and shorten the time for innovation, your stage gate process is shortened.
So here's an interesting dilemma, Nick. So AI can, enhance a project at the speed of light,
Yeah.
right? So by the same token, if the AI platform that you're using is not properly trained, it can spell disaster at the speed of light as well.
That's right.
Maybe you can comment on that.
No, you're absolutely right. So think about it like this way, right? You use an AI tool to generate insights. So you're churning through a lot of data.
Yeah.
You're coming up with something, and you think this is your target market. But if the data that you're putting in is garbage in, garbage out, right? If it comes back with a wrong target market, you have to have your business acumen. So I tell the entrepreneurs that, hey, it is your experience, your skill set, along with your advisor's skill set, that is going to actually look at that data and say, is it making sense to me? If it is not, you got to go back and rework the assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a book out there somebody wrote about selling blue shoes in a red shoe market. People misinterpret the data and get it completely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So along the same lines as making mistakes in targeting the wrong market, one of the mistakes that investor makes is they target the wrong investors. It's like they're pitching vegan products to a meat eating environment. And so maybe you can target that a little bit about how entrepreneurs should really target investors.
I think the way to target the investors is be clear, talk about what it is that you're trying to achieve, and also talk about why you're committed to the business. Because ultimately, I'll tell you, it is that entrepreneur who's committed to the business who's going to make my life a lot easier, right? And that commitment comes you're able to find out about that commitment very quickly once you start working with somebody. Right?
What do you do when an entrepreneur comes to you, and their pitch is completely not in your wheelhouse, but it's a good pitch? What advice would you give an entrepreneur
If it's not in my wheelhouse, I would send them to one of our network contacts.
There you go.
And that's the whole point. When I talk to you about the 3 buckets, it is the experience, contacts, and the money. The money is a by the way product because it'll dry up pretty fast if you're trying to build a brand. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah. So that's another mistake that entrepreneurs make, is focusing just on the money.
Yep.
That's a big mistake. You talk about focusing on the experience of the investor and talking about the contacts that the investor has.
Yeah, because I tell you, I refuse to invest. I even tell our syndicate guys not to invest in a company if the entrepreneur is not willing to First, listen. 2, is committed. 3, wants to be absolutely clear that where is the strategy going to go, right?
It's interesting when an entrepreneur is out there looking for money, they're in a sales role.
That's right.
They're selling a concept, they're selling a dream, and there's an old adage that every salesperson learns right out of the gate. Even though you don't go to school to learn it, you learn it through experiences. That we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should approach all of our communication and use those God-given gifts in the same proportion. Listen twice as much as you talk.
You're so right. I'll give you an example. You've seen, obviously, everybody sees Shark Tank and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But when you come and you pitch, first of all, don't think about your valuation. You could have a valuation, but that's not the valuation I put on your business. Okay, so I've seen people go in and say, look, my company doesn't have a single revenue or dollar in revenue, and I'm going to take 5 years to build the software product. My valuation today is $11 million. How did you come up with that? I don't care what spreadsheet you put together, it ain't $11 million.
It's funny you mentioned that. I had a conversation this morning with Chris, our founding partner. We're talking with a client, a prospect who's looking to raise, some money to acquire 2 very successful businesses. So they're looking for about $18 million in funding, equity and private debt. And the big question that came up in the conversation was valuation, because valuation is a double-edged sword. You can overvaluate the opportunity, in which case an investor will basically tell you to punt, or you can undervaluate your company, which tells the investor that you really don't understand the market. So maybe you
what
can.
Did you just say? You said market, Jack, and think about it.
Yeah.
Your valuation is what the market will pay for it.
Exactly. It's like anything. You can put a price tag on anything, but it's only worth what people are willing to pay for it.
That's right.
That's true with investors as well. It's really key. The other part is communicating the story. A lot of times people will get out there with a story. It's not very clear what they're doing, and sometimes a very succinct, a very succinct analogy, like something like, we're kind of like Uber, but for houseplants. It's a simple.
What you're trying to solve for, right? If what you're trying to solve for is very clear in the investor's mind, right there, you've got the investor, right? Because the investor believes in your vision. See, that has to happen first.
Yep.
Right. And then comes second. Like, for example, there are businesses that have come to us where I think they can make money, but I don't know how I can help them. So I withdraw from the process.
Yeah, they didn't make it clear.
Business that I think I can help, I tell them, hey, it's just like, do you want us to get involved? If you get involved, we are going to be heavily involved, right? And some entrepreneurs may not want that, right? Because they're afraid to get that kind of involvement, but it only benefits them in the long run.
What kind of exit strategies are you most comfortable with, or what do you look for when an entrepreneur comes to you and they talk about their project and then they talk about exit strategies? What's your take on all that?
I don't pay attention to their exit strategy. I take the product and the business and the brand and the market they're playing in, and I see whether there's a strategic investor or a financial investor. I can start pitching. It takes me 2 years to do that, right? So I try to build on that, because a large company ain't going to buy your product, but if they like your product and you're at about $125 million in sales, I could probably pass it off to somebody.
Yeah, this comes back to the business plan again. When entrepreneurs talk about their business plan and they do their pitch, they always talk about getting to profitability. And I know in our discussions you talk about not just getting to profitability, but to getting to scalability. And this is where the post-money valuation comes in and where the attractiveness for an acquisition or an IPO, comes into play.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the most important thing is the scalability. How fast can I grow?
Yeah.
Right? And how am I making use of the money to grow? Because then I can get you to profitability.
There's the other weakness that that companies make a mistake. They're not really clear with how they intend to use the money that you're investing. And
Right.
I always talk about this with clients, and it's kind of like a broken record, if you will. But you have to make sure that when you're accepting funds, that you're going to be good stewards of that money. And whatever milestones you declare in your initial business plan with an investor, you got to make sure you have enough funding to meet those milestones, because the worst thing that can happen is I have to go back to the well. Something happened in my project that I had no control over, and it cost me some money or time, and now I'm out of money and out of time, and I have to go back to the well. What's your advice to entrepreneurs?
See, the first thing I'll tell you, when an entrepreneur comes to me and I see a $200,000 package for him out of the money, in terms of salary, there's a problem, right?
Big problem.
Big problem. So what I tell them is, look, guys, minimize your expenses for anything personal, maximize your expenses for growth. Once you do that, it changes the dynamics of the game. And a lot of the entrepreneurs, once they understand it, and you told me about success versus failure, right?
Yeah.
Some of the failures were because the costs were too heavy and they was burning money like water, right? And on the other hand, the entrepreneur who started scaling back on unnecessary expenses and actually was able to go after a simplified cost structure to build the business did very well in the long run.
Yeah,
So it's
sure.
not necessarily that somebody who's just fast out of the gate is going to get the price. You have to be methodical, and that's where we come in, right? Because we have seen it. So I tell people that I cannot guarantee your success, but what I will do is, from our point of view, we as a company will minimize your risk, because we have been there, we have done that, we understand it, and we're going to bring you some of the best of breed to help you.
Coachability is key, and I'm sure as the investor, that's an attribute that you look at. I use this analogy. I use Shark Tank as an analogy. I mean, Shark Tank is a whole stage production, but one of the things that I notice, and this applies to your outlook on working with entrepreneurs, is the investors who participate are offering their expertise, whether it's through QVC or through distribution channels or through connections. And it's really important that that entrepreneurs listen to the expertise that an investor can bring. And the other big issue that I see is time that an entrepreneur spends working on their business versus working on raising money, because there's a time division there. Both
That's
are
a great point.
I'm sorry?
That's a great point, because the reason I chuckled is we have a couple of situations here where the entrepreneur who is supposed to be working on the business is running around trying to raise more money, right? And I'm like, no, you focus on this. Let me figure out who to send you to, as opposed to you running and calling the list.
That's why we're in business. iCFO started out as a interim CFO, fractional CFO business,
Mm-hmm.
and because our early customers and clients have now accepted investor capital, they're off to the races. That money is used to go and build sales and build revenue, rather than going out and spending more time to raise more money. That's why people like us were in business at iCFO Capital. It's really important to understand the time value of money when you're raising capital, to focus on the business and understand how much, what the opportunity cost lost is when you have to spend time inefficiently raising money. And if you're not using your investor network properly, it becomes a real resource sink for you.
Because there are steps,
Yeah.
right? And there are stages of investor funding. So as you go through each stage, you are able, if your business is doing well, it meets the stage. It's great. In fact, I'll give you an example of somebody from iCFO Capital who came to me and they said they have a wonderful product. We were on this tank, that tank, and we all that wonderful stuff. But at the end of the day, there was no pathway to success. And right there, we said it doesn't make any sense for us to get involved.
What was the final straw in that situation? Where did
The
the straw
entrepreneur
break?
was not willing to listen.
Not willing to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, they were so much in love with the product that even when you actually take them and show them it's not going to work, and the barriers to entry were so low that anybody could have actually come and put the product in place.
One of the classic mistakes that people make is really not understanding the size of the market that's out there and what portion of that market they should focus on and can actually capture. And as a salesperson, I worked in sales my whole life. One of the things that I had to deal with, that every salesperson deals with, is quota. Right? You look at a company that has a hockey stick growth rate, and all of a sudden your quotas are going up, exponentially. And that's because people in marketing or whoever is in management is misreading and not understanding the actual marketplace and just how big that market is. And more importantly, in order to capture a defined portion of a market, it takes a certain amount of money to capture that market. There's a formula for that, in every industry. In the computer industry, you got to spend 5% of revenue to do market capture and growth. That's just that was the formula in my day. And I'm ancient history now, so I don't know if that's true anymore. But that's a misunderstanding that a lot of entrepreneurs don't get. They don't really do the market research to understand who it is out there that can actually buy your product and how much of that can you actually capture.
That's right, because the market size is important. Your competitive environment is important.
Yeah.
You have to understand the consumer psyche at the end of the day. And if you're in a B2B business, you got to understand why that business is going to buy from you versus somebody else. So when I look at the big four, and they're all competing for the same business, right? And if you're competing with the big four in some way, shape, or form, I want to be able to come back and tell you, hey, that's great. Here's a niche. Get that niche done and let one of the big four come and buy you out.
There you go. I mean, it's a classic example of focusing and being successful vertically first.
Yeah.
Finding that that deep narrow vein of gold. There was a book written out there, 3 Feet from Gold. I don't know if you remember that book, but it talked about gold miners that were looking for gold, and the folks that understood how gold is formed. Gold forms in vertical veins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you're looking for gold, when you find an indication of gold, the strategy is not to fan out and dig in places where there is no gold, but to concentrate in that area that you found and go deeper and deeper and deeper and master it. Once you master a vertical market, then you can contemplate expanding horizontally.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on. Think about it. You come to an investor and you tell them, hey, my product is, I've got this product. I want to go into China. I want to go here. I want to go there. And then I ask them, how many products have you sold in your zip code? And the answer is 0. Why am I giving you money?
Why are you giving us money? Yeah, that's it. I mean, you need to focus. One of the other areas that we talk about with early stage companies is, where they are in the fundraising process. There's the bootstrapping early stage, then there's the initial, funding seed round, then we talk about a Series A round, and so on. What's your outlook on how that whole process works, and what might you tell early stage companies about, their fundraising activity?
See, in the early stage, I think it's very important to, you remember the word commitment I had used before.
Yeah, you have, yeah.
If you are committed to the business, the early stage, in the early stage, and you have put your own money in, that makes a big difference, right? I've had situations where people come to me and say, "Oh, can you write us the first check?" So why am I writing you to invest in your business, okay, when you're not doing it?
Yeah, how much have you invested? Yeah.
Correct. So that's a very important part of the puzzle, and that shows you the commitment. I think, yes, time is important. Yes, money, yeah, all that. But as you progress through, your metrics become more important. Have you hit your metrics? What are these metrics? How do you define these metrics? Have you worked with your advisors to define those metrics?
Yeah.
Right? You guys had bought a guy to me some time back who was in the education business, and he had almost like a legend in his own mind. He wanted $5 million from one of the investors, and there was nothing there. And that told me that, look, if you can't even articulate for me what your unique value proposition is, why are you asking for $5 million? Now, somebody else, my Aunt Martha, may write the check, but I am going to do it.
You're not going to do it, right? You're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you run into this all the time. People. You talked about this earlier. You talk about products that are on the market, and the entrepreneur is so wrapped up in the product that they don't think about how real that product is in the marketplace. And if they can't justify where that product is in the marketplace, or if they're not willing to put some money into the effort to raise additional capital and show some commitment, and why would you write a check? We talk about. I talk about this constantly. It's old habit, but a check gets written, when a couple of things happen, and there's a lot more to it. But you got to find the investor that's a right fit investor, somebody that's interested in what you're doing. You got to find somebody that has the ability to write the check size you're looking for. You got to find an investor that you can arrive at a term sheet that's mutually acceptable. You got to find an investor that is actively investing right now, right? Then you got to find an investor.
A lot of people are actually not investing right now because they don't know where the market is going.
Yeah,
right. That's a big concern.
Big concern, right? Yeah, I'll get to that comment. I want to comment on that in a second. And the last piece of those 5 stars aligning is you want to find an investor that's going to be sticky. That your value proposition is so good that you want that investor to stick with you through thick and thin. And I'm sure there are other factors, but those are the top 5 that come to mind.
Those are very good factors, Jack. Yeah. I mean, those are very good factors, because if an investor sticks with you and understands the value that you're bringing to the party and he's bringing to the party or she's bringing to the party, it becomes a very interesting dynamic, right? Because the investor is part of your team to make this work. And remember what I said in the beginning of the conversation today. Yeah. I said you need a team to make this whole thing work. So you cannot be like a lone wolf trying to say, like, I can do it all on my own. I had a guy who came to me once in the liquor business, and it took him almost $15 million to build his brand.
Okay? Wow.
The sales were nowhere close. But to build the brand, it took him that long. But once he built the brand, guess what? Somebody else came and bought him out.
Yep. They saw the value.
That's right.
They saw the value. One of the areas I like to talk about or like to learn about, and investors, need to talk about, and entrepreneurs need to understand, is the term sheet, the value and the importance of a term sheet. And I kind of like to get your take on what you like to see in term sheets.
See, I think of the term sheet as a contract. Okay, I may be offering you something, but my term sheet is a contract.
Yeah.
I'm expecting certain things from you as the entrepreneur. You're expecting certain things from us as investors. You're also expecting a very clear articulation of where it starts and where it ends.
Do you look at a different kind of a term sheet based on where the stage of the company is?
Yes.
And can you maybe describe some of that
I
for us?
think it depends on, say, for example, startups, we don't complicate it. I don't want a very complicated thing. There is a certain number of shares I want in the business if I'm putting equity in.
Straight
If we're
equity.
putting loans into the business, right, we want collateral.
That's an interesting point. As a business helping companies raise money, we generally frown upon early stage companies that are funded through loans for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is a lot of investors look at their money being to go service the loan rather than build a business. you know, but early
But
stage.
sometimes it's actually a good idea to get a loan on a collateral. I'll give you an
Yeah,
example.
if you can
If they
service.
have the collateral, for example, if they have a home and they have collateralized the home, that's not a bad idea. Why not?
So that's an interesting point. You look at entrepreneurs who have a great idea and they're strapped for cash. They don't know where to go. They have not a clue about raising money, and yet it's a complete black hole for them. They're really neophytes in the whole game. What's your take on somebody that will risk their house on an idea or their kid's college fund?
I'll tell you something. Commitment. That's where it learns to. Very often we have bailed them out from that situation by coming in and giving equity into the business. Right? So
So
they have actually collateralized their initial startup.
yes.
We see that commitment, we bail them out with an equity injection.
So you look at that as a positive, not a negative.
Oh yeah, I look at that as a part. Look, there was a guy who was a sandwich business, retail, right? Lots of sandwich businesses around the country.
Sure.
He had over $40,000 in credit card bills.
Oof.
Okay, so each time I saw what he was doing, he was actually putting his expenses for the business into the credit card.
Yeah.
So what we said is, let's wipe this out because we don't want to pay 25% interest rate.
Yeah, that's interesting. That runs completely counter. It runs completely counter to the intuitive nature of looking and funding at a business. Personally, personally, that's risky to me. But I'm not the same level of investor or have the experience that you have, and that's a valuable bit of information for entrepreneurs to know.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that as a response. Quite honestly.
See, for us, when I look at this, why are we in this business, Jack? You and me at our age, we're in the business to help people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We've been there, we've done that. Large companies, small companies, we've been helping entrepreneurs. I think it's a very good thing to do because this country was built on it.
Yeah.
Small business.
We're benevolent repeat offenders, Nick.
Yes. Something like, when you started this conversation, you asked me how many failures. I mean, the failures are numerous, for heaven's sake. And I have no problem in talking about them. But one or two hits gives you a lot of satisfaction.
Well, if you're not failing at something, you're not trying hard enough.
That's right. And look, here's what I tell people, like they come to me and say, look, even when you're succeeding, the forces around that success are out to get you in some way, shape, or form, right? You have legal, you have all kinds of stuff coming out of the woodwork. Yeah. And your job, when an entrepreneur comes and he has not done his due diligence in terms of the IP, in terms of the technology, in terms of protecting his technology, that's where we come in and we say, look, let's make sure that we have got all this ironed out.
First, it's interesting. The first thing I talk I talk to really innovative entrepreneurs. Is non-disclosure forms number one. Make
Yeah,
sure
like
you're not.
NDAs. Get your NDAs down.
And do you have a good attorney? Yeah. You need a great attorney.
You need a great attorney who doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. We learned that lesson. There are attorneys who are great, but their fees is so exorbitant you can't afford it. And as an entrepreneur, that's one area where you got to be careful.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, we do we do investor relations, and we do convertible note financing. And one of the things that happens is a lot of entrepreneurs come to us and they look for fee for performance. And I tell them, from our perspective, we can't even look at that because we don't look good in orange jumpsuits. We're not permitted. We're not dealer brokers. By the same token, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to protect your IP. If you don't protect your IP, then the value of your company can disappear overnight.
Correct. And Jack, right there is the nail on the head. An entrepreneur can come to an investor or a group or whatever, right, and say, I need the money. Okay, great. But I have not protected my IP. I've not protected my, products in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what the competitive environment looks like. And all of a sudden, your hair on the back of your neck goes up as an investor.
Oh, big time. Big time.
So you kind of understand that. So I would rather they spend the money on the right legal structure and take the advice from guys like us who understand that space. I can tell you, look, I don't need a 50-page term sheet. I can get it done in 2 pages.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And as long as you can live with those 2 pages, the contract is done. The contract is a contract.
Yeah, it is. It's just you have to live with the terms. The terms got to be equally beneficial to everybody.
Exactly.
And if you can't arrive at a term sheet, then you've got either the wrong investor or the wrong entrepreneur.
Yeah.
There's got to be a meeting in the mind. And then one other topic that that is a little baffling to folks is the time involved in raising money. When you look for a raise of X amount of dollars, there should be Y amount of time associated with that. What's your take on on the length of time to raise a certain amount of money that entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Look, that is a very hard question, Jack, because the amount of time varies by industry, it varies by business, it varies by the unique idea that you bring into the party.
It's true,
because sometimes I chase. Okay, when I'm chasing, it's very easy.
Yeah.
For somebody to get the money, right? When I say I am talking about an investor, okay, we are looking for certain things. But if we are not, and people come and throw different ideas at you, it takes a while. Due diligence is important. I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, I had a guy from the entertainment business who came to me. Right? He wanted to check then and there because he had got a positive cash flow business that wanted to sell. Okay. Now, would you write a $160,000 check without knowing what the business was all about? I wouldn't.
I wouldn't get a penny. No one would.
No one would.
No one would.
And so right there, he told me inexperience. Okay. Because they're thinking, hey, somebody's going to write me a check because I'm such a great guy. Right? That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. But because, yes, it could be a positive cash flow business, but you have to actually compensate. So one of the things I like about your business model is they have to compensate you to play. Okay, because otherwise, why take fee for performance? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, we can't do it for legal reasons, obviously, but but there's the other business reason that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
it's like any other.
It's like even for us, when they ask us, okay, spend, say, a month, 1 week a month, right? That 1 week you have to compensate from whatever money I put in. You have to compensate that.
the analogy that I like to give is that, an entrepreneur is going to spend money on marketing. They're going to spend money to build a website. They're going to spend money to hire an attorney. They're going to spend money on this, that, or the other thing.
Accountants, whatever.
Whatever, and the advisory service, is a service that has costs like any other business. We have, people's salaries to pay. We have lights to keep on. We have
Exactly.
and all that. And, we try to keep the costs down on the business side, and of course the fees down as much as we can, because early stage companies, really have to guard their money. It's their most important resources, their time and the money they have available.
And that's why the linkage with the investor is so important.
Yeah.
Because the investor's job is to do that.
Well, there we go. Yeah. We'll wait. We'll give a second. What I also wanted to talk about is, early stage companies using their hard-earned either bootstrap capital or early stage money and runway time, left. What do you look at when you look at the cash position of the early stage companies and their ability to sustain themselves for a certain period of time to raise money? That's why I asked you that question about the time it takes to raise money. It's a function of how much cash you have available, how much time you have left to raise that money to keep your business up and running.
See, you're never going to have enough time. Okay.
Good point.
But if I believe in the product,
if
I believe in the entrepreneur, and if we think there is an ability to put some structure around the concept and scale it, I'll give them the time.
There you go. That's you mentioned that earlier in our conversation. And the last topic, I want to leave some time for questions, is
Sure.
about, you mentioned earlier about market conditions and the way investors are looking at the market today. Can you give us your take on what the investor market looks like today, and some of the factors that that are shaping your opinion of the market?
Look, there's a lot of things, uncertainty in the market, right? The issues with tariffs. Now, it could be a good thing. I don't know. Okay, but it's there. It's looming its head on top, right? Now, the issue with consumer prices. Give you a great example. My wife and me were shopping at our local Costco, and we noticed an item that we bought was basically doubled in price at a big box retailer. I'm like, what the hell is this going on here? The product is coffee, for heaven's sake. It shouldn't be double the price.
It's funny you've mentioned that. My wife and I were away for a week. We got back. There was no coffee in the cupboard. We went to the local supermarket, and last week that container of coffee that was $11 and change was almost $18 today.
It's crazy. $20. I'm like, okay, what's going on here, right? And, we don't worry about too much, because God's been kind. But when I look at that, I'm saying, what's happening? So that uncertainty is there. The second thing in the market is volatility in the stocks. Okay, so that's also creating, some uncertainty with people, like the real estate market. Great example. I love the fact that the president of the country is telling us, hey, get this interest rate down, it'll help. But we have a Fed chairman who's not doing it. So that's an uncertainty. So look, at the end of the day, you need the market to be in sync. And right now we are not finding it in sync.
There's tremendous disconnects. The tariff issue is really wreaking havoc on established companies who are in the process of long-term planning, and so with unsettled cost of acquisition of raw materials and other goods necessary to run their business, it wreaks havoc. We look at the tariff numbers, and the government is collecting a lot of money. Okay. But that may
look. I mean, if the government collects a lot of money, I'm very happy. Go for it. At the end of the day, the entrepreneurial mindset has to have the money, right?
Yep. It's volatility in the marketplace. It's uncertainty and political the whims of the day, and so it makes you as the investor kind of really having to take a really hard look at an opportunity. And so investors have money. They have money to invest. What's happening, at least this is my perspective, is that the time frame in making a decision to invest is
It's
now
a lot longer.
is
It's a lot
stretching out.
longer.
Yeah,
And the same equity,
yeah,
same investors who had equity in, let's say, for example, you had a portfolio of real estate products,
yeah,
okay? And you had equity in those products. If you can't sell the house, what the hell are you going to do with
yeah,
it? Right? It's an asset that is a dead asset, right? And that's the problem, right? So you have to start thinking about, the market has to start thinking about getting in sync. And to a large extent, create environment for growth.
yeah,
See, somebody had mentioned to me about the other day, they were talking about the technology to make products, right? So, good example is China versus Mexico versus India. You know, as a CEO of a company in this country, I want to have the flexibility to invest anywhere in the world and still sell my products here, right? But I do understand the current political environment, and what it tells me is made in America sounds great, right?
well, well,
But if I can get it cheaper, I would figure out a way to make it in America eventually. You
well,
follow?
here's the reality. The reality is that we're a consumer-based economy. This
Yeah.
country has been spoiled for 75 years essentially, and
Mhm.
so we don't have the raw materials or the manufacturing capacity to feed the demand for all the products, the variety of products that we consume as a consuming nation. So we have to go out and import products that we cannot make here, and so there's a trade imbalance, right? There's going to be a trade, not
See,
necessarily
and
those
that's why you
trades.
want to make this thing, Jack.
Yeah,
You want to be able to get in sync, and that.
yeah,
Look, as
yeah,
a you know, as Americans, it
yeah,
is our job and duty to encourage the environment
yeah.
so that it actually grows, right?
That's
I want to
that's
hit certain targets. I want the country to hit certain targets.
exactly exactly right. So I want to leave a little bit of time. I know Bob is here. Bob's an entrepreneur. I don't know if Bob, if you have any questions for Nick. I know you usually have some great questions for our guests every week.
I do. I guess one of the first questions I had, you had mentioned the current environment and how the decision process is taking longer. Um, what how do you effectively communicate with investors in the current environment? I just for background, Scriptive is an edtech SaaS. We're going for a seed round. Um, any advice or counsel about how to position what we have to offer to the investor more effectively?
So, Bob, great question. I don't know much about Scriptive yet because I haven't heard your pitch, but just taking what you're telling me, it is extremely important for us to get an understanding of what the product solves. What is it you're solving for, and why is it so unique in the marketplace, right? That nobody else can come and get you. That helps me understand whether, remember the three things that I talked about: the
Yeah,
money, the strategy, and the contacts. Those are the three things that can help a company like you. So if I think by putting the money in, I can leverage the contacts and the strategy, I would do it. That's a lot shorter window, right? But if I think by putting the money, I'm still delaying the process, I wouldn't do it.
So,
So you
you know,
have to go back to the and Jack mentioned a very unique thing. If this is in my wheelhouse, whatever Scriptive is, I'm not, don't take it the wrong way. If it is in my wheelhouse, you would have my commitment. If it's not in my wheelhouse, I'll send you somewhere else, right? And that is what you want to look for in an investor, a partner. An investor, at the end of the day, it's not just the check writer; it's your partner. then make it work. Otherwise, why do I need somebody?
Very true. I would love to have that conversation.
Yeah,
There's an opportunity for you guys to connect and exchange some ideas. I'm a former teacher, Nick and Bob.
yeah.
So I spent 10 years as a public school teacher, teaching science and math. And I fully understand exactly what Bob is doing, because Bob is solving a problem in writing skills and reading skills for youngsters. And this is a big problem today in education. The public schools are not doing as good a job as they could be doing, and this is a way for consumers to augment their children's education at a really reasonable with a really reasonable investment. That's the unique thing that Bob is bringing to the marketplace, and so he's solving a very important problem. But that's something that has to be communicated to investors that have an interest in that area
In
as well.
education,
In education.
investors, remember something, investors who are in education who maybe, and also Bob, what Jack described is great, okay? Because you will, at the end of the day, you also have competition. Because people have figured out that the education in this country doesn't help people do math very well.
I apologize for the shameful plug, but Bob has been doing this for a long time. He's really dedicated to what he's doing. He's really providing an ethical, valuable service out to the community here. And so I want to see him get funded.
Yeah, see, there are companies, Bob, today who are offering Singapore math, for example, to your students, right? So you're catching these students at a young age and you're doing the coaching classes and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest things is I don't need my son or daughter to go to a class. I want to sit at home, get in front of your computer and get that math right? And if you can
writing, or writing or reading,
or writing or reading. But I focus on math for a simple reason, because I do find that very challenging, actually, when we get a college-educated Ivy League school MBA who comes and says, I need my calculator. I'm like, well, most of this, my dad used to do it in his head. So makes a big difference.
I can relate to that. I was in sales and distribution, channel sales, working with channel partners and retailers. And, there's a difference between margin and markup. It's a very important distinction when you're talking about profitability, working with your channel partners. And when I had people work for me and they would bring deals to me to look at so that we could supply goods to retailers, I always ask them to look at what the margin and the markups need to be in order to make this profitable for us and profitable for our channel partners.
That's really good.
It was like talking to a wall. Just they did not understand that basic math concept. And so
it's a good product. It's a good product if you can actually solve the problem.
Yeah, and Bob is in that category. He's got a great service, and he's doing a wonderful.
Good question, though.
Yeah. So maybe you two guys can connect afterwards. At least have a conversation. And Nick, if you're not the right investor, maybe you can help Bob, find some of the right investors to at least talk to. Yeah, that'd be great. All right. So I want to respect everybody's time. It's 2:00, and I appreciate Nick. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us today. Bob, thank you for joining us. Steve, thank you for joining us. And of course, the wonderful Alejandra, who puts this all together. Without her, this would not be possible. So thank you. Thank you, Ali. Much appreciated. And we'll hope to see you guys again next month. And if anybody has any questions, you have my email address.